It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sapp, and we're so excited to be back for Season 6 and continue bringing you outstanding ideas and thought leaders and different ways of thinking. So don't forget to subscribe because you're not going to want to miss any of it. This week, I'm welcoming my guest, Rob Barnes, CEO of BettyBot, an AI chatbot designed specifically for associations. We're going to be talking about building the business case for digital transformation. It's February 5th, 2024. Welcome to episode 227. Hey, everybody, it's Monday, February 5th. That means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips. Thanks so much for joining us this week. And to our global audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. And thanks once again to everyone for joining us. This week, we have first-time guest and new to the States, Rob Barnes. He's the CEO of BettyBot, and we're going to be talking about how do you build the business case for digital transformation. But before we jump into the conversation, Rob, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. This is great. I'm so appreciative of the invitation, particularly being so new to the States. I know that we had the opportunity to connect when I was doing my CAE, so thanks for all your help with that. Rob Barnes, newly appointed CEO and co-founder of BettyBot, and I've recently arrived in the US from Sydney, Australia, where I spent the best part of the last 3 decades working for a range of associations, both on the association side and the last 10 years on the tech vendor side in the association space. So looking forward to talking to everyone a little bit about some of my experiences, primarily from that association manager perspective, because I think that it's certainly helping me navigate the tech vendor side of the space. And this is a great show to be on to talk through that. Thanks, Cecilia.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Rob. That's really kind of you to say. I appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about Betty. You have Betty in the background. I was doing a little bit of reading about who Betty's actually named after, and it's a female scientist who didn't get a lot of recognition. Can you give us a little background on Betty's inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an important story for us to tell because for the most part, when people think about AI assistance these days and you use female terminology around it, people are a little bit challenged by having a female assistant kind of stuff. But that for us, it's not at all the case. Betty is named after Betty Holberton, and Betty Holberton was one of these pivotal but hidden figures in computer science back in the 30s and 40s. And for the most part, anyone that is a computer scientist, software engineer, doesn't realize that a lot of the work that they're doing today is based on some of the foundational elements that she developed back in that time. And so when we had the opportunity to use the platform of BettyBot as a company and as a product to do our little hat tip towards Betty, that's exactly what we chose to do. So it's a great story and one that's an important one to tell so that we can really give some kudos and some recognition to one of those hidden figures.
Oh, I just love that. I was so happy to see that. And, I just love the name BettyBot. And I got to meet some of the BettyBot staff at the 2023 MMC conference. And they were really friendly and answered a lot of good questions. And they said you can even name Betty after somebody else if you want. So do you have association clients who do that? Maybe they name it after one of their founders?
Yeah, so actually one of the most recent deployments of a bespoke version of Betty, the Marine Retailers Association of the Americas launched their version of Betty, who they've named AIME, AIMIE, and it stands for AI in Marine Industry Education. So super clever. And also they built a whole iconography and brand around AIME. And one of the most fun things that they did was launch AIME at their recent dealer trade show. So it's their largest event of the year. And AIME had her own booth at the trade show. So on the trade show floor, you could go to the AIME booth, interact with AIME on the screen. MRAA had a lot of foresight around the industry knowledge in fact, the the broad market data that they have for boat dealers in the industry, and have trained Amy on all of that. And so the dealers were able to come up and ask us some really, technical questions around market trends and these sorts of things, and do it live at the trade show. So that was just a really fun way to launch Betty, Amy in this case. Some of our other organisations are doing some really cool things as well, a bit like us in terms of using it as an opportunity to recognise the institutional knowledge that prominent members have given the organisation over decades and sometimes half a century, and naming their AI tool after those prominent members.
I think that is really a great aspect of BettyBot, is that it can be so personalized for any organization that wants to use it. And of course, bots, chat bots, other kinds of bots. I know I don't know how many different kind of bots there are, but I know there's more than chat bots. But I do know that this is an important part of the digital transformation that has been ongoing for decades now in our world. So before we start talking about building the case for digital transformation, Rob, how do you define digital transformation?
So wherever there's an opportunity to use a digital technology to enhance the work of the organization, I think is an opportunity for that broader sense of digital transformation. In some cases, it's actually not related to the technology at all. In some cases, it will be building a cultural layer within the organization's operations and the way the organization works, so that it has this environment internally within an association, both staff and volunteer leadership, to be available, open to the digital world. And I guess I find it still a little bit hard to believe that some associations are walling themselves off from digital opportunity or digital transformation and trying to stay where they are. And we have always done it this way, we don't need to move, but still in this day and age, it's occurring. And that's why I like a lot of the work of, say, Jamie Nodder, Maddie Grant at Propel. They do a lot of work around transforming an organisation just to be ready culturally for what technology is bringing to the table. And then other organisations, like actually there's a company called Symmetry, and the team at Symmetry are doing a lot of work with associations, getting them ready for technological development. So readiness for the kinds of transformation that's occurring. Now, this has been happening for a really long time. Back when I was with the Fitness Industry Association in Australia, we were trying to ready that organisation for transformation as it related to databases. So it was something simple, 10, 12 years ago, where you just had to be ready to go from one database to the next, or marketing automation for that matter. What I've learned since we launched BettyBot is that the pace of change, the pace that an organisation now needs to get itself ready for digital transformation with the advent of AI, is exponentially greater than it's ever been before, and it's only going to get faster. So this discussion about building a case for transformation, but even just the readiness for the kinds of transformation that's going to occur in the era of AI, is a really important one, and it's one that I'm pleased to be able to share some experience in.
Well, I agree with you. This has been going on for decades, but too many associations and other types of nonprofits have pretended they can ignore it, and they can't. We have to live in the world we're in. That's a principle I live my own life by. I remember carbon paper. I remember typewriters. I meet people who've never seen, heard, or even used any of these things, and I remember like those old mimeograph things we used to run off in school. And, you love to smell the fluid on those things. So that's a sensory thing that's gone away, but we're in a digital world now. So we need an app for everything. We need to have online access to our education, our information, our knowledge bases, each other. So I think the time for this conversation is every day. So I'm really glad you're here to talk about it with us. So building the business case, when you and I were talking about this episode and how we wanted to present it, you mentioned something about budgets being already set, and sometimes there's not a lot of room in the budget to add a new digital tool like a chatbot. So, what are some tips or advice or some things you've seen in that area that maybe could help people present their business case?
Absolutely. The experience that we're having in talking about BettyBot to a lot of organizations every week right now, one of the common themes is as excited as the association exec that we're talking to is getting about what's possible in using a tool like BettyBot and others, they're working within a budget that was set 6, 8 months ago, as an example, and that they are unable or unsure how to work within the bounds of that, the business plan for that year, the budget for that year, and bring a case to their CEO, or if they are the CEO, bring a case to their board to say, I know we budgeted for this. Now we want to use that money for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and what a lot of organizations are not able to do or not have yet found the courage to do, to be fair, is to just have a pool of funds available for innovation, a pool of funds available for opportunity. I used to call it leaving room for serendipity. When you run into something or you run into an idea, you hear about a technology, they don't often have this pool of funds available for them to go and say to the CEO or go to the board and say, I found an idea and I want to apply to our innovation fund to experiment with this. That just isn't what is common in associations even today. So when we circle back at the end of this, one of the things I will encourage every association CEO and board member to do is to start thinking about, let's leave an available pool of funds for opportunity. Still, even if it is a pool of funds, you still need to apply what I believe is a really strong business case to have that happen. And so understanding that a business case is an important tool to be used to, I was going to say justify, but it's more about being able to position an opportunity in the context of what impact is this going to have if we do this, and be very clear about what the objectives are in doing that, and then be allowed to go and experiment. I think it's incumbent upon us as association execs to make sure that we're doing that appropriately, and aligning that opportunity to what we've already decided is the strategy of the organisation. That's probably the foundational elements of this business case tools that I've worked on over the last few decades.
Well, and you had mentioned you had a story to share about building a case for something. So I think this is a good time for that.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So when I first started thinking about building a presentation around this, building a business case for digital transformation, it's easy to get wound up in the, well, we need to fight for budget for a piece of technology so it makes our lives easier. When I wanted to present it, I wanted to tell a story. And so I have often told the story of back in 2020, 2021, I was leading up to my 50th birthday. And I wanted to ride my motorcycle around Australia in 50 days for my 50th birthday. That was my plan. And so when I look back on how I made that happen, it was actually the start of building a business case to my wife, my family, and some other key stakeholders who I wanted to participate in that trip with me. And that's the methodology that I kind of used, was like, do I even need a business case? Well, yes, I do. Why? Because I'm about to spend a good chunk of the family's money making this trip happen. I also needed to build a business case to my employer at the time because I wanted to spend 50 days away from work and my team. And I didn't want to do it by myself. So I had to build a case with my son and two of my closest friends to come with me on the trip. And so I kind of used the same methodology to get what I wanted. And I was pleased to say that in 2022, three of us rode our motorbikes and my son drove a support truck behind us. We rode 15,000 kilometers. So that's about 9,500 miles. We lapped Australia completely in exactly 50 days. And we raised $15,000 for charity, for the charity that I volunteer for back home.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that story. So you must be very persuasive.
I think I made the point that my intent was to do this, and I wanted to do it with everyone's support. And so again, just use the opportunity. It certainly helped that when you start telling people that you want to do this for a purpose greater than just celebrating your 50th birthday. And for mine, it was volunteering for the Smith family, which is a children's education charity back home, and raising that money. People start to get on board with that broader purpose, and so that helped. It particularly helped distract my wife from the fact that I spent so much money on a new motorbike.
Oh, that's great. No, I love that. That story is actually a great analogy to how you do build a business case for anything in an association or other types of nonprofits, because you have to identify the stakeholders, find out what's in it for them, how can you get their support, build the consensus. It sounds like it took you about 18 months, which is about how long the average decision like that takes based on my own experience. You had a budget and you had a higher purpose. So that is, I think, a great outline for digital transformation or other types of transformation within any nonprofit.
Most definitely. And particularly this aligning to priorities is key. So every association has a strategy and has strategic objectives. They are set typically in 3 to 5 year kind of increments. And so I would highly recommend the first place to look is if you've been presented with an opportunity from someone like me who comes and says, hey, BettyBot is going to be a great addition to your tech stack, and you're interested in that, that's wonderful. I help the association execs that I talk to align that opportunity to a strategic objective that already exists, that's already been approved by the board. So that alignment is critical. And then the next layer of that is to understand what's the hypothesis here. The hypothesis would be if we invest in BettyBot and we deliver on this is exactly how we anticipate it is going to have a positive impact on the achievement of the objectives towards this strategy. That alignment is critical to at least getting your foot. That to me, that's just getting your foot in the door. Your CEO's door, getting onto the board agenda is to say, you've already approved us going down this path to achieve these things. You've given us a budget as a staff to go and work within. Here's the thing that I want to invest in as a result of those guardrails. And as long as you can stay within those guardrails, a good board that's governing and not managing an association should let you go and move forward with that. As long as you do the next layer of it, which is essentially what's the return or what's the impact? How will spending money on this thing, this digital transformation project, impact our objectives greater than probably the 19 or 20 other opportunities that you've been presented if you're working in an association?
Well, I really like that approach too, because I think we all need to do that. We have to identify what are the current objectives and how does this tool support the objective? Because I'm sure you've heard people say this, you're very well connected, obviously, in the nonprofit area, but people talk about the next thing, the next shiny object that's distracting people. And how many times have boards taken things off the rails because they're like, we need this thing without testing it or seeing if it's actually the tool that's going to work for them. And so I think being able to really explain what something like a BettyBot or other type of chatbot can actually do, if it's well placed and well situated. I think we've all run across those annoying chatbots that don't really know anything.
Yeah.
And they're very poorly programmed, or they don't have access to a broad enough knowledge base to actually be truly helpful. So what are some of the things that you see? What are some challenges, not just with BettyBot, but with maybe some other technology tools that people might want to add for digital transformation? What are some of those roadblocks or missteps that people should be aware of?
When I was purchasing software for my associations, and it's kind of how I got grounded in the opportunities or the value of good relationships in the tech vendor sort of market. The thing that challenged me most is that there's still an expectation that you have to do these apples for apples comparisons in order to present some options. You have to go to a board or go to your CEO with, I've sussed out the market, I've done an RFP, and here's where those things are super challenging because the way technologies work, particularly now, it's very difficult to make apples for apples comparisons. So for boards that are still expecting the tick and flick across an RFP document and be out, that's you have to experience what technology is capable of doing and the impact that it's likely to have. Uh, One of the things I learned, so I had a short stint out of the uh, industry actually just before we met. I was working for Intuit and the
Mhm.
QuickBooks accounting product for a period of time. And one of the things that I took away from that experience has stuck with me ever since, and that is they work what they call customer back every time. So every decision that's made about the product, the go-to-market strategy, it's all um, based in this customer back. Even to the extent that if you go to a meeting where you want to pitch an idea at Intuit, if you don't say in the first couple of seconds of your pitch what a customer felt about your idea, the meeting stops because it's really simple to pick up the phone and talk to the end user, the person that you're trying to add value to. In our case, a member or a member company. Ring them and say, "I had this idea. I think this is the benefit. What do you think?" Like, get that initial feedback and do that 5 or 10 times because that customer feedback, that member feedback might kill your idea straight away because if all of them just say, no, that's not going to work, and this is all the reasons why, then you're going to go down a completely different path. And that's free and it's super easy. And that's what even at Intuit and a multinational, like multi-billion-dollar company says, and it comes from the founder, that you can easily draw a diagram of what you think your idea is and present it to a customer. It costs you nothing to do that. And that feedback is more important than any other business case that you might build. I'd love to see that happening more in associations. And I'd love to see tech vendors taking that approach, even in the way they bring their solutions to the associations market. The other challenge, and it's one that is incredibly important now to address in the age of AI, the rate of change in technology that's available to us now is exponentially greater than it's ever been before, and it's not slowing down. The decision-making processes that associations have for making investments in technology is still this. You mentioned that before. It can take 18 months to build a case
Yep.
to make change. We can't do that in the age of AI. Things are changing so rapidly, and I'm not talking about the decisions around whether you use AI or not. The way AI is changing, the way technology, the way generative AI, the way machine learning is driving medical advancements, um, advancements in industries that we are all representative of in the association world, decision making has to become more rapid. Boards need to be ready to kind of like be agile. CEOs need to be ready to be agile. Um, just because that's the way people are going to expect. Our members are going to expect us to be far more responsive, not reactive, but responsive to the opportunities that come our way because they're experiencing that in their everyday lives. Their associations need to be representative of that in order to maintain a meaningful relationship with them. So I feel like that is another challenge for associations right now is how do we improve our decision-making processes with the appropriate risk and governance and stewardship. I love that Jeff DeConey continues to talk about stewardship. That's important. We just need to do it so much faster than we've ever had to do it before.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the thing that never changes is the association mindset when it comes to how we do things, the way we think. People like myself point this out. We say we need to change, and people say, oh, we're just going to go back to, well, this is just the way it is. There's a lot of acceptance, and sometimes acceptance is good if you're doing yoga, but it's not good if you're living in a rapidly changing world like we are. And we really do need to focus on that. And I think as a profession, the people who are the professionals in nonprofit management, we need to keep emphasizing that message because stewardship is great. It's a concept that's gone back many, many years, and it is the most important role that a chief executive officer or the board can play. But stewardship also means adapting to the world around you. And too often we just practice that. Well, that's how boards are. That's the way it is. What are we going to do? And then we wonder why we're not keeping up, why we're not making these decisions more quickly, and why AI is speeding ahead while associations still say we need a new website. Because I've been around long enough for when websites were a thing and all the boards were like, we need a website. They had no idea what they were or why they needed one, but they wanted one and they're not understanding it. And so that's really a lot of things within the governance structure that do need to change. But bringing it back to the AI question, I think the other thing about AI is it's a wonderful tool. I personally do not use generative AI, but I love using AI for research. So I like to use research tools. And then I go back and double check the research and make sure it's accurate. But I think that it's a great tool for that. But we still need to have an awareness of how it can go off the rails. It can get us into trouble. So I've heard a recent example of somebody at a nonprofit group that one of the staff used generative AI for something, didn't double check it, and they ended up getting accused of plagiarism. And they didn't have an internal policy in place and they had not even talked about it. So we really need to talk about it too, because things like BettyBot can be just a boon for member service and helping people get the answers they need quickly, and let staff focus on other things. But we do need to have those internal conversations. I don't know if you have any guidance on that for the audience, but if you do, we'd love to hear it.
There's no question that, well, firstly, that using the term AI and even generative AI is becoming generic. It encapsulates a lot of different technologies. In the case, one of the reasons BettyBot exists at all is because the early days and then the very first public release of ChatGPT, people didn't even understand where the GPT was getting its answers from. It had just trained itself on the entire internet, all the rubbish as well as the good stuff, and it gets better, but the entire tool has not been retrained. It's too expensive for them to do that.
Oh.
And so one of the challenges and one of the opportunities that my co-founders Thomas Altman and Dre McFarlane saw in seeing the underlying technology in the large language models and natural language processing was, if you could train a tool on an entire association's body of knowledge and make that knowledge accessible to the people who need it when they need it most, and then have it learn from that interrogation, that conversation, to create new knowledge. Now that's an opportunity. And so we have not yet met an association in the last 3 to 4 months that hasn't said, we've got this amazing website that we've spent tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands. It is rich with content, in some cases 100 years worth of knowledge, but our members still complain that they can't find anything. We want to redo our website first, and then we're thinking about a chatbot. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's stop right now. If you don't need to do that anymore, because the value of something like Betty, and specifically Betty in this context, is you can train her on the entire body of knowledge. And when a person interacts with her, she is only using that industry or that profession's knowledge to provide her answers. She's walled off from the public GPTs. Her answers are not training the public language models. And all the interactions are actually owned by our customer, by the association. So all of a sudden, we're unlocking this century's worth of journal articles, news articles, blog posts, white papers, policy documents, video content. And it's being used actively by an everyday user, a member behind a member login, or in whatever form. And those conversations between Betty and the user are forming new knowledge. And the new knowledge is something that she's trained on and can continue. So we're calling this the association knowledge cycle. And that's really the foundation of what Betty does. So why is that important? If you were building a case for introducing an AI tool into the work of your association, the work of your staff for that matter,
right,
then you need to build a case for what impact is this going to have. Here's a great example. if you work in a scientific organization and you onboard a new team member into member services or into education or into advocacy, and you get asked a question by a series of members, probably the same question multiple times, because you get the same questions via email or phone call, and you've been with the organization 2 months, where do you go to find the right information to give the answer that's going to be accurate? Because they're going to take action on your response. It could take time. You've got to find a subject matter expert. You're going to try and ask your supervisor. You might, it's time consuming, problematic, and you're rarely going to have the complete body of knowledge available to you to construct that answer. Mm-hmm. Our customers that are using BettyBot, who have been trained on every journal article for the last 30 years, every policy document, every standards document, some of these standards documents are 6,000 pages long. No one is going to read all of that and remember it every time they get asked a question by. So we've been able to deploy Betty even as a team member. She's only used internally by staff, so she's not public facing. Email comes in, technical question about graphene or equine practicing or health law. Mm-hmm. The staff member is able to say, Betty, I've just been asked this question, literally cut and paste it, help me with a response. Not only does she curate the response like you've experienced and like many of us have with a GPT, you get a nice conversational response, but she references every document that she used to curate that response. So you can verify her knowledge. You can verify the source. And that's, for associations, that's critically important. One, because it's validating the fact that they have the right knowledge available, and now the AI is making it accessible. Second, it gives them the opportunity to do what you said you did, which is, I'm going to double check this. And when you do that and you can prove that, you can build that into your business case in two ways. One, you can do the due diligence that's required. Our information is secure. The responses are accurate. It saved me this amount of time across all our staff. And now the staff can do the things that are human, that are still required to create great member value, instead of doing the machine stuff, which is looking for everything, trying to remember it, trying to communicate it in a way that the person responds. They can do the real value work. So the humans actually get unlocked as well to do amazing work for their members. The thinking, the planning, the forecasting. Let Betty do the hard yards. And then you can go into the point of like, well, this is how much it costs to have this piece of technology available to us every day. This is how much time we've saved. This is how much additional work. This is how many other objectives that we've met. And on a per member per month basis, it's costing us cents in the dollar to have this technology available. And there is, to date, and I've sold a lot of technology to associations. I bought a lot of technology for associations. I have not yet experienced the return that some of our customers are experiencing. Literally cents on the dollar to invest in BettyBot, to have this powerful knowledge assistant available to you, is why I moved halfway around the world to work in this space.
That's great. And that's really what I find fascinating about BettyBot, is that it is really just directed to your organization's body of knowledge. It doesn't go outside. So and you can really give the best answer to your members. And I think that's a huge value add. And especially because I've heard people say that about websites too. I'm not a tech consultant, but I hear people talk about their websites. I can't find anything. Or, I've participated in several taxonomy groups over the years at ASAE, as they were trying to make it easier to find things too. So it's really having that kind of a tool that can be that fast. I mean, it's almost like having your own version of Google. Google's a verb now. So, having your own internal Google to go through everything you have would be amazing.
Two key things here. One is, if you do search, even really good federated search, all it does is give you a list of all the things that you still need to go and read to find the piece of information that helps you right now. I don't have time for that anymore. And it's not necessary anymore. Right. Betty has read, memorized every word of every piece of content. And so then she's also ready for any question that gets asked. So the other complaint that you hear from association staff a lot is, we get asked the same question over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Well, Betty doesn't mind. She's online, available 24/7 if you open her up to a member. You can ask her as many times, and it's costing cents on the dollar per month to have her available to do that. So again, it frees up the staff to go and do more meaningful work. Again, importantly, they're about the knowledge base. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is the knowledge of the association being used outside of the Betty environment? And no, she's not. It is not shared outside of that environment. So she's not training anyone but herself. And even across our customer base, it's only your version of Betty that is training on the interactions that are going on between the content. What we've learned, which is really fun, one of our customers showed us that what she did, more importantly for them, was brought up, she surfaced their knowledge gaps because members were asking questions for which they had never published content to answer. So she was politely declining to answer. That's not currently part of my knowledge base. Please reach out to the association. They didn't even know as an association staff that they had never published content about this. So that surfaces the knowledge need. They used Betty internally to go back and say, can you please help us write a white paper, a policy document, or at least just a blog post? And she was able to curate that content based on what she did know, some supplemental information coming from a subject matter expert or a committee, add that all in, produce some content, publish that, retrain Betty. She trains herself on that new content, and all of a sudden it's no longer a knowledge gap. And that can happen literally within minutes or hours, not days and weeks and months of committee meetings. So just the fact that she's helping organizations understand where they don't meet their members' needs from a knowledge perspective is as important as unlocking the things that they already do have that are just not being used anymore.
I hadn't even thought of that. That is such a great point. And one of the things that I've become increasingly interested in overall is knowledge management. And so having a tool like this, wow, your knowledge management is just, it's going to fall right into place. And finding those gaps, or maybe we just need an update. I think that's marvelous. I mean, that's very exciting to
as
hear.
Excited as we are for Betty as a tool and an AI tool and what it will do, we're equally as excited about this association knowledge cycle and the power of that continuous approach to building the knowledge bases, unlocking what's there, creating new knowledge by letting people interrogate that knowledge base with an AI that's capable of knowing it all, doing it in a safe and secure environment, and then generating this new knowledge in a really meaningful way. If you're a marketing manager or an event manager and you have to think, what blog topics are we going to have webinars on over the next, or what blogs are we going to publish over the next 6 months? Our customers with BettyBot just ask Betty, what are the areas that are most interesting to people right now that we have the least amount of content on? Bang, there's a gap. Let's produce some knowledge about that. Let's run a webinar. And you've got an active audience because people are already asking about it on BettyBot. So that's quite exciting to see how that cycle works.
And that's an excellent point, because that also opens the door to more member engagement, because you can invite members who are the SMEs on that topic to come in and do the webinar. So it does open the door to a lot of things. And it's really incredible how the right tool can support so many different areas of successful outcomes. And I think if we started connecting all of the things within our organizations, we would all be a lot more productive, a lot happier with our outcomes, and we'd also actually see the bigger picture more often. So this has been a wonderful conversation. Again, I'm not what I would call a tech person, but I really like technology. I like reading about it and thinking about it, and I'm a high-level user of it myself. So I want to thank you for joining me to talk about digital transformation and building the case for it, because it's a case we should constantly build. But before we sign off, Rob, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And then how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up and get more information?
Thanks, Cecilia. The one thing I would say I'd like people to remember is leave room for serendipity. I think that's my bumper sticker. And So when you're thinking about building your next budget, when you're thinking about building out a plan more broadly, try and keep some space available simply for innovation, simply for experimenting. So, and yes, ultimately it's a bucket of money. So start talking about what would happen if we just had some funds available for people, have an internal shark tank, if you need to at your association so that people can pitch ideas because it will do two things. One, it will unlock some opportunities and give you an opportunity to be a little bit more agile as an association to take advantage. The other thing it will do is help people, help the internal stakeholders, staff in every department learn how to build a business case and pitch for the business. That's not just fighting over spreadsheet line items. I have some of these tools built. If it's at all useful to anybody, I built a series of Word documents and Excel files that I use to literally build my business case to pitch to boards and CEOs in the past. And I'm happy to freely share those with anyone that wants some help. So they can email me, rob@bettybot.ai, anytime, and I'd be happy to share some of those tools. So that for me is the real takeaway here is leave room for serendipity and learn how to build a business case and pitch your business. And I'd be happy to help anyone that wants to do that.
Yeah, that's a great saying. I like that. So, and also an inspiring comment to get people to put a little money aside every year in the budget for things that you're not expecting. So that's great. So, well, I want to thank Rob Barnes again of BettyBot, their new-ish CEO of that organization. He's been doing it for a little while now. We have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. So don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast service. We're on pretty much all of them, so you can find us. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. We have a services page that has a lot of information. If you're not finding what you're looking for, let's talk because we can probably work together. And like Rob, if you're interested in getting the CAE and preparing for that, we have an education program at Rogue Tulips called Rogue Tulips Education. It was formerly the 501c League, still has the same website. Why? Because it's so big, it needs its own website. It's the 501cleague.net. We have study groups and courses forming in February for the May exam. And feel free to reach out if you have questions. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of Rob and myself, we'll see you next time.